This episode is brought to you by Bumble. So, you want to find someone you're compatible with, specifically someone who's ready for a serious connection, totally open to having kids in the future, is a tall, rock-climbing Libra, and loves rom-coms with vegan pizzas on Tuesdays just as much as you do. Bumble knows that you know exactly what's right for you. So whatever it is you're looking for, Bumble's features can help you find it. Date now on Bumble.
Parents will tell me, and I'm sure most of you have experienced this or heard this, the only thing that gets my kid to do what he's supposed to do is if I threaten to take his phone away. Now, that's indicative of something. That means that the phone has become the most important thing in his life, and that's where he or she will do what they need to do in order to keep or get their phone back. So don't use the phone in that way. And if you are aware of that, that means the phone has sort of taken over your kid's life and that's their priority.
Welcome to Season 6 of Flusterclux with Lynn Lyons, where we talk about a family's anxiety and all the big feelings, too. We tackle the serious stuff without being too serious, and I'm your co-host, Robin. I'm Lynn's sister-in-law, and I'm here to ask your questions.
And I'm Lynn Lyons. I'm an anxiety expert, speaker, mom, and author, and I've been a therapist for over 30 years. Parenting can be a Flusterclux, and I'm here to help you find your way. I'll give you concrete steps to take and the words to say. Hi, Robin.
Hi, Lynn.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. My wheels are spinning. I read the article that you sent me, and I'm so glad we're talking about it today.
Yes. The article was written by Jonathan Haidt, which is spelled Haidt. He had an article in The Atlantic about kids and cell phones and sort of the cost of a smartphone childhood and what we can do about it. We're going to put a link to the article. I really recommend that everybody read the article because it brought up very valid concerns and points that I've been talking about, that a lot of people have been talking about. And I just think we haven't talked about phones and tracking and cell phones and that kind of stuff for a while. So I think it's time to talk about it again.
I think you're underselling just how damn important this article is, that people really need to read this.
You really, really need to read this. Like, read this article.
So that's just like my little push for it. And I think that it's true that it's not that anything in there is shocking to people who are thinking about these things, but it's a very well presented argument. And I think it packages this information in a really powerful way that also really digs into technology, the different stages of development and all of those things, so that a parent at the end is sort of left like, okay, what are we going to do?
Right. And here's the interesting thing. When I say to parents, and I did a little Instagram reel on this a few weeks ago, when they say like, what should we do? What could we do? And I say, take the phones out of the bedroom, limit the amount of time kids can spend on a phone. Don't give your child a phone too early. And when you do, pay attention to some people are like, oh, that's what we have to do. I mean, it's just like, I'm like, yes, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, no one wants to hear it.
There's such resistance. So I think we need to just drop our resistance and begin to really look at what these smartphones at earlier and earlier ages, what they are doing to kids' development, what they're doing to their social skills, what they're doing to their sleep. We just have to look at it, guys, like eyes wide open. We didn't know that this was going to happen. We didn't understand this. We didn't get it. Now we do. So now we have to make some changes.
I mentioned this last night at dinner to my kids, that you told me about this article that I needed to read, and we were going to do an episode.
Did they roll their eyes?
No, quite the opposite.
Oh.
They're like, oh, no, it's so true. No one can read anymore at school. Like, that's what my middle schooler said. He said, nobody knows how to read anymore. It's weird. And then my daughter piped in and said, yeah, the rates of literacy are really, really bad now. They said, like, you can see there are certain kids who have not academically developed in the way just because they haven't had the same opportunities too. So my kids were like, oh, no, we know it's a problem. And they know that they have a problem too.
Yeah. And that's what the article did such a good job of saying is like, look, we all get caught up in this. I mean, read the article, but one of the things that really jumped out at me was that study that they did. They asked 1,000 college students, how much would you have to be paid to get rid of TikTok or Instagram, whatever social media app you use all the time. So I asked my husband that. I said, so they did this study and they asked these college students, how much would we have to pay you to delete this from your phone? My husband said, oh, I don't know, $10,000. Do you know what the answer was? $50.
Wait, what?
$50. That was the average. They want someone to get rid of this. So that was just individually. And then the question was, what if we could get your whole cohort to get rid of these apps? How much would we have to pay you? And they said $0. And in fact, we would pay you to make that happen. Please release us from this prison. The thing about it, just like you found with your kids at the dining room table, that kids know that they're held hostage by this. They know the distress. They are copping to the distress that it's causing them. It's just that we know that when things are so compelling, these algorithms are really addictive. They pull us in. They do the same thing to adults. And so we have to step in and say, okay, this is not something that we can continue to do in the same way that we've done it for the last 10 years because the data is in everybody. This is not what is helpful for kids, particularly younger kids. And so let's just say that we're talking about kids before high school, right? Let's just say that we're talking about kids from kindergarten through 8th grade. This is a time when more and more kids are using screens. Little kids are on iPads. I've said this before. When they put the frickin' DVD players in front of every seat in the minivan, I was like, we're screwed. Because it got in the way of kids interacting with each other, kids interacting with their family members. Particularly for younger kids, we've got to stop the madness.
I just want to give a little bit of a breakdown a little bit about this article. It is important that I think every parent read this. And there's some really fascinating data about the timing of where along the line of technological development and also when certain households had access to the technology and what impact it had. And I think that one of the things that's so important to think about, because all of our listeners who are even parents very clearly remember when they got their first smartphone and they suddenly had access to the internet with them and what that did and how exciting that was. So adults also had this too, but they talked about the earlier days of the internet, if it was on a family computer, a family, laptop or dial-up computer, and we could hear that AOL sound. Right. It didn't have the same kind of impact, a negative impact that it did when I think it talked about from like 2010 onward, then everyone was holding the internet in their hands because there was a point when all of a sudden 70% of all high school students held smartphones in their hands.
Right. And it was Wi-Fi because we forget that you used to have to use your computer attached to something in the house. It was when you could take it with you and have it with you all the time that things really shifted and changed for sure.
Lynn, you talk about phones as certainty devices, which I really like because we've often talked about how the technology in childhood actually starts in pregnancy. People would buy their own electronic, what do you call them? The fetal heart monitors?
Oh, yeah.
So some parents would buy those when they were pregnant. And then a lot of parents, most parents still had a baby cam that they could watch their kids. So you just think of all of the technology and the certainty that we're constantly seeking.
Right. And that's the message, is that you knowing everything about everything when it comes to your kid makes you a good parent. And so that is a way that we get sucked into it.
Yes. And that carries over because if you were to say, I love the idea of my 9-year-old, having unstructured play out in the neighborhood with a bunch of kids, but I want him to have his phone on him so that I can reach him when I need to reach him.
Yeah.
So it's in conflict. Even the parents still want the certainty that the phone brings.
I was doing a workshop the other day, which was it was such a good workshop. It was such a good crowd. Oh my God, it was so much fun. And so I was talking about the importance. It was with mental health providers and school people, et cetera. And I was talking about the importance of unstructured play. I was ending my talk and I was telling the story about when I dug up my guinea pig, which let me just say, the reason I dug up my guinea pig was because I was on a cul-de-sac with a ton of little kids. We were outside. We played by ourselves all the time. I asked the people in the audience, how many of you had free, unstructured play away from the eyes of adults? And like virtually every adult in the room raises their hand. So I said, so let me just tell you, this is what happens when kids have unstructured, unsupervised play. Cheryl and Teddy and I got in an argument and we were like 7, because Jerry had died, my guinea pig. And they said that Jerry had gone to heaven. And I said, well, maybe Jerry's spirit went to heaven, but I think Jerry is still in the shoebox. And Cheryl and Teddy were insisting that Jerry was not in the shoebox. And I was insisting that Jerry was in the shoebox. There was only one way for us to solve this debate, which was to dig up Jerry. And of course, Jerry was in the shoebox, everybody. It's still one of my very validating core childhood memories, because they were telling me that Jerry wasn't going to be in the shoebox and Jerry was in the shoebox.
So there.
And I said to everybody in the audience, if parents were watching that, would any parent have said, all right, well, let's dig him up, right? No, but we did it ourselves, right? And it was just us having a conflict, figuring it out, coming up with a way to solve the problem. And we did it on our own at 7 years old. And that would not have been a sanctioned adult supervised activity for sure. Okay, but here's the funny part, Robin. At the end of the talk, this woman came up I told her she listened to the podcast, so I told her I'd give her a shout out. Hi, Krista. Krista comes up to me at the end of the talk and goes, hey, I just want to let you know, I also dug up my guinea pig.
It's a thing.
Yeah. It's a thing. And I was like, I've never met anybody else who dug up their guinea pig. So we had this wonderful bonding moment. I said, why did you dig up your guinea pig? And she said, I was just curious about what was happening to my guinea pig in its decomposing state, right? These are the things that I know some of you are listening are like, that is insane. But what I'm telling you is these are the things that kids do. This is the curiosity. This is the discovery. This is the messiness of childhood, that when your kid is carrying around a certainty device, for one, they're probably not even outside very much, everybody, is that it gets in the way. If we had phones, we could have just Googled, does a guinea pig's body go to heaven? And probably we would have got an answer that said, well, their spirit goes to heaven if you believe that, but the guinea pig is still good. And then we would have had the answer without actually digging up the guinea pig.
Yep. When we come back, I want to talk to the parents out there who are really into achievement.
Oh, okay.
This message is sponsored by GREENLIGHT. When you're a parent, you'll have your fair share of big talks with your kids, and one of those big talks should involve money, and GREENLIGHT can help with that.
I actually was just talking to a family that I work with, and they started using the GREENLIGHT card for their middle schooler. It is fabulous. They are finding it so convenient, and it's such a great way to have conversations about saving and spending and earning. It really increases financial literacy and independence. And I'm all about independence.
You can send your kids instant money transfers, get real-time notifications of spending. They can manage their chores, and you can automate allowance.
Millions of parents and kids use GREENLIGHT to learn how to make responsible financial choices.
So stop putting off the money talk and start putting your kids on the right path. Sign up for GREENLIGHT today and get your first month free at greenlight.com/fluster.
That's greenlight.com/fluster to try GREENLIGHT for free. greenlight.com/fluster. I love learning new things, and I love hearing from people who are just great at what they do. For example, there is a masterclass with Esther Perel. She is in my field. She's an expert in relationships, in communication. Watching her masterclass is just like a treat to learn from people who are so good at what they do.
I love that Esther Perel is really only one of many incredible masterclass instructors, and it's really some of the best screen time we can have as adults.
The videos are so engaging. You can learn cooking. You can learn humor writing from David Sedaris. You can learn tennis from Serena Williams. I mean, the lists of classes are just amazing to choose from.
You get to learn from the world's best. With Masterclass, you get unlimited access to intimate one-on-one classes, and there are over 200 classes to pick from, with new classes added every month.
Plus, every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. There is no risk. So right now, our listeners will get an additional 15% off an annual membership at masterclass.com/fluster.
Get 15% off right now at masterclass.com/fluster. That's masterclass.com/fluster.
So Robin, when was the last time you really treated yourself, like to a pedicure or a massage or, a colonoscopy? If you want to treat yourself to the top options with everything in life, including a colonoscopy, why settle when finding a doctor? Because it's your health after all. So enter ZocDoc. This is the place where you can find and book tens of thousands of top-tier doctors, all with verified patient reviews. So I'm not going to settle on my pedicure. I'm certainly not going to settle on my colonoscopy. Go to the best and the right doctor for you with ZocDoc.
ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare highly rated in-network doctors near you and instantly book appointments with them online. So when you're talking about booking appointments with tens of thousands of top-rated, patient-reviewed, credible doctors and specialists, that makes it easy. The typical wait time to see a doctor booked on ZocDoc is between 24 to 72 hours, and that's it. You can even score some same-day appointments.
And that is such a convenience, isn't it? So ZocDoc is a great way to get the healthcare you need. This is the choice that you should make because it's what we do in order to make sure that we are taking care of our health. So go to ZocDoc.com/fluster and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today.
It's so easy. I've used it for my kids. That's ZocDoc.com/fluster, ZocDoc.com/fluster.
Okay, we're back.
Here's the thing that really stuck out to me when I read this article. So I'm talking to the parents right now who have ambitious plans for their kids. I've got a senior in high school right now. So I'm talking to those parents who are willing to fork out money for college counselors. I'm talking to those parents who are thinking about how to get their kids into a competitive reach school. Here's the thing. Your children's phones are interfering with their performance academically. And the article really points out, even professionally, I think this is actually the most shocking impact of all of this is that the older members of the Gen Z generation are the most difficult in the workforce as well. So if you guys really want your kids to have a leg up, as a cohort, you need to agree to stop the cell phone use and have more side rails on this. Because your kids will benefit and everyone will eventually benefit too. So be the leaders in your community that you are going to curb the use of cell phone for your kids' peer groups. And this is where it comes up that made me think about this too. I remember the first time I realized that there were these college internships that required all of these Zoom interviews at a company I was working for at the time. It's because a lot of kids don't know how to speak anymore to people. They don't know how to answer the phone. They don't know how to have conversations. And if you have had opportunities for kids who they still know how to socially interact, they're in the elite group now.
Yeah. When we look at social development, I mean, they're looking at the impact that these phones have had on literacy, on kids reading. And remember, I said in a previous podcast, one of the things that increases executive functioning is reading for pleasure and unstructured play. So phones get in the way of those two things. What we know about this smartphone use is that kids are only communicating very often through words. And when you're in real life, when you're in front of somebody, like when you're on a Zoom interview or an in-person interview, there are all these things that we are hardwired to read and learn about. We need practice reading body language. We need practice reading facial expressions. We need practice hearing tone. We need practice dealing with awkward silence. We need practice responding in real time, because one of the things that's so interesting about conversations that kids have if they're only communicating through social media or through texting is that it's not in real time. So say you're in a job interview and somebody asks you a challenging question. You have to answer it right then. You can't say, all right, well, I'm going to think about this. I'm going to text back later. I'm going to write a text. I'm going to edit it. All of these skills that come from being in front of somebody socially that are thousands and thousands of years old, these skills lead to connection. They lead to friendship. They lead to nuance when you're dealing with all sorts of different people. And phones take all of that away. It's a different way of communicating that has its convenience for sure. But if it completely takes the place of all of these skills of socially interacting, reading people, dealing with conflict in real time, this is what we're looking at as a problem as kids move forward. And like you say, they're in a job interview, they're in a college interview, they're a part of a team in some way.
We talk about connection and its importance, and it's kind of everything. But I still think that adults are very confused. Often, if they don't feel enough connection in their own lives, it's very hard for them to think about the skills and things that are impeding their kids' connection too. And that's why I'm really hoping that there is a movement equivalent to the red shirting, even if it comes from a place of achievement, because I feel like that is like the one very simple rat race approach of parents that everyone relates to. Everyone relates to that, and everyone understands that if that's how this could start, and then hopefully it gets into something much deeper. Or do I sound too cynical?
No, I know exactly what you mean. And what is interesting to me, again, is that when we say over and over again, this isn't going to help your kid, but parents continue to do it because they are so afraid of their kid not keeping up, their kid not fitting in, they're afraid of failure. A very good example is sleep, right? We say all the time that your child is not going to be able to function well in any capacity when they're not getting sleep. So take the phones out of the bedroom. Make sure your kid is getting sleep. Parents still resist that, right? They'll still say, well, we're going to load up their schedule. So my high schooler is getting to bed at midnight and getting up at 6 a.m. We know that that's going to impact virtually every aspect of their functioning. And so part of it is that parents really have to sort of step back and say, okay, so what are we doing here? I do think that the social support of other parents helps a lot. And I think that one of the things that's really hard for parents, and parents say this to me all the time, is that say your 10-year-old wants a phone. And by the way, guys, smart watches are not different. So if you're thinking that your kid having a smart watch is a better thing than them having a smartphone, you're kidding yourself, parenthetically. But okay, so say there's a 10-year-old and they say, well, everybody in her class has a smartphone. She's the only one who doesn't have it. And so if I don't let her have a smartphone, or if I don't let her do Snapchat, if I don't let her do these things, then she is going to be ostracized. She is going to be left out of the group, right? So if your kid is the only kid who can't, parents are like, I'm not going to throw my kid under the bus in that way. So it means that parents together have to say, in our class, in our friend group, in our social circle, we are going to have a consistent message about phone use so that all the kids are figuring this out. When I look back at my teenage years, I know that this happened about drinking, because there was a period of time where it was kind of cool for parents to provide alcohol to teenagers. And the thinking was, well, at least we can keep them safe because they're drinking in our home. And parents had to have that wake-up call and then kind of band together to say, we are not going to support this idea that giving kids alcohol is a good idea. We're going to be consistently against that. And I think that that happened. And then, there's even like shaming about it. If you're the parent who's giving the kids alcohol, you become the bad parent. And I think that with phone use, parents need to feel like they have the support of their peers so that we can stop this trend and we can at least delay it. A 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old should not have a smartphone. They should not be on an iPad all the time. They should not have their devices at the dinner table, and neither should you, parents. But it's just become so ubiquitous that it's hard for us to pull back from that without the social support of our adult peers.
My kids talk about flip phones a lot. I think flip phones are going to make a comeback.
Yeah, for sure. Because, the convenience of communicating, there's no doubt about it. If we're going to start somewhere, let's just start delaying this as early as possible and not giving our little kids screens, phones, iPads. The DVD player in the minivan, I was like, ugh, here we go. And I was right. I was right. And here's another thing that I think we have to pay attention to. And maybe parents, you guys can relate to this. I hear from so many students, high school students, and even middle school students, that we have to have our phones because our teachers are putting assignments on our phones, that this is the way we communicate with our teachers, that we text with our teachers. And I think that educators really need to take a look at cell phone policies in schools again. I think the horses got out of the barn, and I think the horses need to be put back in. If a child's education is now primarily happening on screens, and if kids are saying, well, I can't do my chemistry homework because my teacher is texting us about the assignments, I think that the adults have to really take responsibility for that. I think there is movement back toward stopping cell phone use in schools, stopping smartphone use in schools. But really, as the adults, we have to recognize the impact of this, and we've got to do our very best to turn this ship around.
We have a hydration agenda in our house that every morning we each fill up these huge water containers.
Well, hydrating is great and water is fabulous, but what if you can have something that gives you 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sport drink, plus 8 vitamins and nutrients, right? That just makes you feel better every day. Liquid IV is a really good option for us to stay healthier, to stay hydrated, and it tastes delicious. It's a sugar-free drink.
I'm really into the watermelon.
I like the lemon lime. That's my favorite.
I have a couple in my bag because they're so portable. I can give them to my kids as well after soccer practice. Everyone loves the way they taste, and it makes getting hydrated easy.
Well, and you and I are on planes. Having liquid IV as a way to stay hydrated when you travel, it's just so convenient. I have trouble getting in as much water as I should, and this is just a way to make it easier, and it's just so much tastier. And the things that are in liquid IV just make me feel good about drinking it.
However you hydrate, grab your Liquid IV Hydration Multiplier sticks, buy them in bulk nationwide at Costco, or get 20% off your first order when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code FLUSTER at checkout.
That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code FLUSTER at liquidiv.com. If you've got kids at home, I think you probably feel like you're feeding them all the time. It's just trying to come up with good recipes, good food, things they'll eat. Well, there's a great podcast. It's called Didn't I Just Feed You? It's a weekly podcast. It's hosted by longtime food professionals Stacey Billis and Megan Splon, and it's about feeding our families. It's even for parents who hate to cook because, really, kids eat a lot. So every week, Stacey and Megan get real about feeding kids, tweens, and teens, from how to turn nachos into a family dinner. That sounds good. To the magic of meatballs, or dealing with that after-school snack problem. They talk about coping with picky eaters and the mental load of being the family cook, all as part of their mission to make cooking easier, more delicious, and maybe even fun. So Didn't I Just Feed You is available on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your favorite podcast. You can learn more on didn'tijustfeedyou.com or find them on Instagram as @didn'tijustfeedyou. You're really going to enjoy listening to Stacey and Megan. They're going to help you out. And isn't that what podcasts are all about? Okay, so now back to the show.
So, Lynn, I'm at a different stage than having little kids, but it is still something that we talk about all the time. Fortunately, my kids are old enough that they are aware that it's an issue and they don't say, "What are you talking about?" So my daughter even says, "I wonder what would happen if I just got a flip phone this summer." She fantasizes about something like that. With the little kids, too, what would be a good ground rule to have for a little bit of it? Because I understand too that we're working parents. We sometimes need kids to be engaged with something other than ourselves. What is a way to do that without it creeping into the issues that we're seeing?
Two things. One is that there is a difference between kids watching shows for short periods of time, right? I mean, we all watch TV.
We watched a lot of TV.
We loved TV, right? We loved Brady Bunch. Again, there we are dating ourselves again. We loved Gilligan's Island. So there is a difference in that. So it's not like I'm saying like no screens at all. But as I think back of it, the rule in my house was that we got one show a week during the week. I've talked about that. Mine was Quincy, medical examiner, weird kid and then I'm digging up my guinea pig. God, I'm just making that connection right now. Oh my gosh, I never even thought of that. So we can limit it. I think that one of the ways to think about this is that if you are using the phone as both reward and punishment, then you need to pay attention to that. Parents will tell me, and I'm sure most of you have experienced this or heard this, the only thing that gets my kid to do what he's supposed to do is if I threaten to take his phone away. Now that's indicative of something, isn't it? Because that means that the phone has become the most important thing in his life. And that's where he or she will do what they need to do in order to keep or get their phone back. So don't use the phone in that way. And if you are aware of that, that means the phone has sort of taken over your kid's life and that's their priority. Flip phones are good. Very short periods of time with screens, you're allowed to limit the screen time. The average kid is on a phone, using their phone 9 hours a day? 9 hours a day. And that doesn't include the time that they're on their computers doing schoolwork. Leisure use of a phone, 9 hours a day. So we have to recognize that. And then the other thing to think about, and I talk about this a lot, is what is your kid not doing when they're on a phone? When your child is on a phone, what are they not doing? And start to pay attention to the things that we know are really developmentally healthy, particularly for young kids. Unstructured play, being outside, moving your body in real time with other kids. You can't do both things. You can't be by yourself on your phone all the time and be outside engaged in free play.
Well, the other way to think of it is, what are the skills that are not being developed by the 9 hours of phone use? Even if you don't feel like you can manage the phone use, proactively give time to practice those skills. And I think family dinner with no devices, essential.
Mm-hmm. Essential. There is a lot of research about the benefits of family dinner. The simple act of sitting down together for a meal. Look at all the rituals and celebrations and communities and gathering. We have that expression, breaking bread. It means that we sit down and we are face to face. We are eye to eye. We are feeding ourselves. We are sharing our bounty. All of the metaphors that you can come up with. So important. And Robin, I know that you are a huge fan of summer camp.
I was thinking about that too. My daughter went to a summer camp that was full summer and no phones were allowed until your last year, because then when you're 16, they felt like they couldn't ask the 16-year-olds. It was phenomenal because she came home from those several summers. I would always point it out to her. I said, tell me about the fun that you had with your friends. Tell me what it was like when there weren't phones. She was like, okay, I get it. I get why phones are not our friends. And when she was still in middle school, that's why I would say, like, when we have sleepovers, like, I want to keep the phones downstairs and where they can be charging so that they are, again, having conversations and they're still engaged without phones, just like the fun that you would have at summer camp. And one of the parents was like, no, my daughter has to have her phone with her at all times, even while she's sleeping, right? So there's the mom's certainty stepping in.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, the parents need to wake up about this. kids sometimes that are on phones all the time, they'll get a punishment. Like I was saying, like you lose your phone for 2 weeks or you lose your phone for a week. And parents will inevitably come into my office and be like, oh my gosh, my kid was a different kid when we took away the phone. And they took away the phone for a punishment. But I'm like, why don't you take the phone away as a healthy choice in your family? I have kids that are so addicted to their phones, and then they go away to summer camp. I live in New Hampshire, right? This is like Camp Central. My son actually right now works at a camp, and he's at a camp conference right now. I'm sure they're talking about phones. And the camp my son went to also was absolutely no electronics, very strictly so. And I've had kids who have gone to these camps, and they will say it was the best time they had. They can't wait to go back. They did things that were active, that were engaged, that were social, and nobody was on their phones. They find it so incredibly refreshing. And because nobody at the camp can be on phones, even the counselors, there's not the social pressure to be on phones. It's just an amazing example of how much our kids are craving what these phones are taking away.
The sad thing that I realized in that is that summer camps are really expensive too. And so those opportunities to really be phone free are, again, sort of stuck with the families who can afford to do the summer camp, because I think that otherwise I think people find access to screens regardless, especially if the screen becomes part of your childcare providing because you're working 2 jobs.
Right. That's a part of what has happened here is that undeniably screens are convenient, they're engaging, they are informative, they're helpful. The lady who tells me where to go on my phone is my best friend when I'm traveling. And so it's hard for us to deny the helpfulness of them. It's just that we have to look, particularly with young kids, please, people, do not put a smartwatch on your 6-year-old's wrist. Do not give your 8-year-old your old iPhone 13 because you got a new iPhone. Remember that the age that boys are exploring porn right now is 9. And there are a lot of young men in particular that are really opening up about the fact that they are addicted to porn, that they haven't had a real relationship with a real other human being because their sexual needs are getting met in porn. It interferes with connection and development in every possible way that we can imagine. It's not going away. Social media, we can say, has its perks. I love watching kitten videos. I post on Instagram. It's a good way to get information out there. But what I'm really talking about and what Robin is really talking about, because she's got kids, she's seeing this, is how is this getting in the way of those really critical developmental skills that have been in place forever and ever and ever, except not for the last 20 years. The last 10 years, probably. Because when the smartphone is like 2012 is when they really started seeing things shift.
On an off note, I'm really waiting for the researchers. I have a theory that we don't even understand yet the impact on the sexual development of these kids because they are a porn generation and we aren't really talking about it because it's uncomfortable.
Some of the research is already coming out because guess what teens aren't really doing as much anymore?
Having sex or kissing or doing anything.
Yeah.
So it's like they don't actually get any action. They spend a lot of time thinking about their labels.
Yeah, I didn't think you were going to say labels. When you said they'd spend a lot of time thinking about their I thought you were going to say another word. Okay. All right. Woo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to end on that note.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. And if you found this podcast helpful, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It helps other people find this information.
And if you'd like to dig deeper on any of these topics, we have specialized playlists on our Spotify profile, and the link is in the show notes. Topics like teens, depression, and OCD. Bye, Lynn.
Bye, Robin.
Oh, hey, everybody. It's us, Blair and Molly, your old pals from Toddler Purgatory. 2 moms who are also actors, who are also creative beings, who sometimes feel stuck.
And this is our new podcast, Unsticking It with Blair and Molly. What happens when your creative spark just seems to disappear? Gone.
Poof. Bye.
See ya. What happens when life gets in the way of your creativity instead of nourishing it? That's what happened to Molly and me. We felt like the thing that drove us creatively stopped working, and impending doom had in fact impended.
Totally. So we decided to do something about it. And that was steal ideas about getting unstuck from the most creative people we can find. We talked to guests about how to break through the mucky, gluey, sticky wall that can get between you and your creativity. We hear about their journeys, their successes, their challenges, and even their bougie coffee shop orders.
And we're not just talking Bob Ross type paint on paper artists here, though we talk to them too. We're talking to actors, creative directors, dancers, and people who are working hard to be their best creative selves in a world that can sometimes feel real uncreative.
We all have something to teach each other, so let's steal their ideas together.
Join us, won't you, as we deep dive into how to unstick ourselves from the life gunk that can get in the way of our creative freedom. Pandemics, school calendars,
World events, lack of sleep. Oh, get out of their life gunk.
and let's get back to your best creative self. Subscribe to Unsticking It with Blair and Molly.
You're not going to want to miss an episode.
Unsticking It with Blair and Molly, because sometimes life sucks.
Unsticking